So up next we have our main event segment here, the Bloodline Appreciation Ceremony. Paul Heyman comes out. Of course, remember everybody, this is New York City. Paul Heyman comes out. He's talking about Madison Square Garden, but he gets interrupted by Solo Sikoa, who asks for the microphone. And at this point, this was enough to get the crowd to boo and chant, "We want Roman here." Solo instead does the introduction, and he starts off by telling us basically he lied because Solo introduces the Samoan werewolf, his enforcer, Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu, who gets a pyro for his entrance here, and I think a pretty good theme song. What do you think about the Jacob Fatu presentation here?
I was going to say, good presentation for this guy. This is his first sort of formal entrance with some music and a Titantron, some pyro. He looks great. I think he just has that again presence that comes through the screen. That for my money, no offense, Tamatonga and Tongaloa don't really have. He just has it. I think even at this early stage, it's time enough to be able to say that.
I don't think you have to worry about offending them because I think clearly this is what WWE intends as well. Because neither Tonga Loa nor Tamatonga ever got pyro for their entrances. No. So clearly they are setting Jacob Fatu at a different level. Unless the pyro, whatever, we can look too deeply into pyro, but I think the performance will kind of speak for itself. And clearly he is becoming just in 2 weeks a standout star among the Bloodline. Somebody that was he's essentially in the Solo Sikoa role, and with the Tongans essentially kind of playing the Usos as a tag team. So after a commercial break, Solo says, "Madison Square Garden, acknowledge me," as the rest of the stable throws their ones up, and Paul Heyman looks horrified. A ton of boos here. Solo then calls for each member to acknowledge him. So what we thought was a Bloodline acknowledgement ceremony is really just a Solo Sikoa acknowledgement ceremony. Right-hand man, Tamatonga, comes in, and noteworthy because he is wearing an MFT shirt.
That's right.
So that is still very much alive. But what do you think, Neal, that MFT means?
I think we know what it means, doesn't it? MFing Tama?
I guess that's what he said. Is that it? Is that all it means?
I think so.
Yeah. Kind of disappointing.
It is disappointing, but I don't know at this stage what they could come up with that would be impressive,
Impressive, yeah. No. Tonga Loa comes in, and then he also acknowledges Solo. Jacob Fatu comes in next. He speaks for the first time and has very charismatic delivery. He acknowledges Solo Sikoa as well. So Solo then grabs the mic or puts the mic towards Paul Heyman, tells Paul Heyman that this is his one chance to acknowledge him, and they also bring out a bag containing an Ula Fala necklace, symbolizing the title of Tribal Chief. The crowd at this point, upon seeing the necklace and seeing what Paul Heyman in New York City has to do, is on fire. Paul Heyman has tears in his eyes. He has the Ula Fala. He's about to place him onto Solo Sikoa when he says, "Solo, I love you, and I acknowledge you." Oh, sorry. I messed it up. "Solo, I love you, and I acknowledge that you are not my tribal chief." It was a lot better than I just recapped it. The crowd goes crazy. Paul Heyman is in tears. He throws the mic down, and Solo gives him a death stare before delivering a Samoan spike. Solo is reacting. I mean, this felt almost like, the Sami Zayn betrayal of the Bloodline. Solo is screaming, "I loved you." He calls for Jacob to deliver a diving headbutt, which is the same finisher that his father, the Tongan kid, had. Jacob and the Tongans then take Paul Heyman's carcass and they bring him to the announce desk, and they deliver a shield bomb to Paul Heyman through the table. Crowd starts chanting, "Holy shit." And at this point, it's Jacob who places the Ula Fala onto Solo Sikoa, making Solo the new tribal chief. So, I guess in all the speculation about Solo possibly working for a bigger, role that some people might have presumed to be Dwayne Johnson, at least now it seems to indicate that he's not really working for anybody, and that he himself he's declaring himself to be the top of the food chain, wearing the tribal chief title. Yeah. What did you think about this segment, Neal?
Tremendous, terrific, really, really good. Paul Heyman, just so great. Like the guy was living the role here. I didn't pick up until about halfway through the show when we saw him for the second time that he was unshaven. I think he had no makeup on. You know, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He looked a complete mess. The shock on his face when you're going to have to correct me. I just call it the lei. Well, the garland. What's its proper name?
The Ula Fala from my research. Yeah,
comes out of the bag. He's like he stops himself from saying that's Romans. And he's so believable in these moments. And these are the spike. He had to go down. That's okay, fine. But the bump through the tables, the biggest Heyman bump we've seen in many, many years, I think. So full commitment to this segment. And the Bloodline guys did well. Solo was very believable as a complete badass. I just think this was great. And I went into tonight's show thinking, it's Madison Square Garden, 14 or 15,000 people are there, and we've got a ceremony and some triple threat matches for Money in the Bank. It doesn't feel like enough. The opening and the closing, I shouldn't have lacked faith. The opening and the closing to this show were both, particularly the closing, were both really, really good.
When they announced this ceremony, this Bloodline Appreciation Ceremony for MSG, I guess I certainly expected something big, to how big, maybe even as big as Roman Reigns appearing was a possibility. But I didn't really put together that this would be a New York City hometown, homecoming, home crowd performance for Paul Heyman as the top babyface and the biggest babyface of the entire evening here. This was, I think, one of the best Heyman performances that we've seen in quite some time. Yeah. You mentioning the unshaven look, it reminds me of when he's talked about doing this in the past, where I'm trying to remind me, chat room, about when he most famously kind of had this look, but I remember him talking about thinking about his father who had recently passed away, or at that time, in order to try to get into this sort of method acting mind state. And he pulled out a lot of those tricks, for this sort of performance. He was just outstanding, and great build throughout the weeks leading up to this moment. With Paul Heyman just kind of being in complete fear of Solo Sikoa and the rest of the Bloodline. It was a big enough segment that I think it delivered some finality to Paul Heyman's association with this version of the Bloodline. Gave a great spotlight on Jacob Fatu in what feels like will be sort of the breakout role in this faction, and continue to give great elevation for Solo Sikoa, who with the Ulafala necklace it does something for him. It makes him feel like he's the guy, and that he's somebody who might actually be big enough to challenge Cody Rhodes for the championship, which has been speculated in many circles. So how do you see the rest of this storyline playing out on the babyface side of things?
Well, I mean, listen, I went in thinking that during that closing segment that Jimmy Uso was going to return, considering the fact that he got excommunicated 2 months ago. I thought he was going to show up and save Heyman's skin, but that didn't happen. So I mean, I feel I bet maybe Jimmy will come back first. And I think Jim's going to come back first, and then he'll get the Jey Uso deal where the entire locker room doesn't trust him, especially Kevin Owens, and then it's going to segue to Jimmy reaching out to Jey, and they patch things up, and then you see the megaton for SummerSlam if Cody versus Solo is going to be the plan. Probably probably at the end of after when Cody wins, Solo's left in the ring, beaten, and then out of nowhere, Paul Heyman walks out in Cleveland, and suddenly, bam, you bring in Roman Reigns, and I don't know if the Cleveland Stadium is gonna have a roof, but if there was, he's gonna tear that bitch off.
Yeah, I think it's on pace for that. Like, I don't think Roman needs to show up until SummerSlam,
Yeah.
and you know, maybe you can do some teasing with Heyman, maybe you can do some teasing with Jimmy, maybe you can do some teasing with Jay. But I mean, all of this to me seems like it's leading up to War Games with the new Bloodline and the old Bloodline. You have four on the heel side of things. You're going to have Jimmy, Jay, and Roman, presumably. Who do you think is the fourth member?
Oh, I mean, well, I mean,
Sammy?
I was just gonna say that because if maybe if it would all depend, and also too, like, I mean, you gotta wonder where Hikuleo is gonna fit, considering the fact
He's not signed yet, but is he a big enough name for? I guess he could be. Yeah, I guess the brother of the Tongans.
well, not to join Roman and company. No, I wasn't suggesting that because there's a good chance. I wasn't suggesting he joined Roman and company because I mean, either Jacob flips because I don't see that. That's not likely because in a perfect ideally he would have flipped. I would say Sami Zayn, but it's going to take a lot of convincing from Jay. Or it's going to take a lot of convincing from Jay to make it happen.
I can't wait for that story. I can't wait. Like, so now we have established our heel threat. I can't wait for like the Avengers to reform. Like they're all just sort of like on loose. They're all completely. They have a lot of things they have to work out in family therapy. But the storytelling that can take place now between the brands, really, in the lead up to potentially that War Games, I think is going to be tremendous. Let's go up next to Hansi. Hey, Hansi.
What's going on? Oh, sorry, man.
All good. All good.
Hey, Hansi.
What's up, Neal? How are you?